Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Avatar Rewatch. We are on episode 10, and this one we are talking about Jett and his merry band of misfits. This is a lot. This one has a lot more meat on the bone. This one's a lot more discussed. I actually really enjoyed it. Jared, what are your initial thoughts?
I liked it, and I liked how it definitely dealt with more of the ambiguous part of war because it's like Jet's like, should we? Jet's the whole debate. The question is, should we kill the Fire Nation no matter who they are, if they're old people, if they're women and children, or should we be more discerning about who we take out?
Not just the women, but the children too.
Like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that after the show. But but yeah. So yeah, basically you have they're in the Earth Kingdom still, and the episode starts with like Katara. She's a little bit more sassy today.
I love it.
She woke up and chose violence, if you will. They're kind of like harping on the instincts of Sokka and whatnot, kind of challenging him to be a leader and whatnot. So they walk, and they literally walk straight into an enemy.
Yeah, ambush. I love that.
You came to the wrong house, fool! I wish I had that clip. I'd be playing that right now. But yeah, so they get trapped, and then they get saved by Jett and his freedom fighters, which is what every terrorist calls themselves.
Yeah.
So they you get some setup. I also got a lot of like Lost Boys kind of vibe from them, like Neverland. Peter Pan and his Lost Boys vibe from them a little bit. So actually, and also I also, now that I'm thinking of it, I want to give a shout out. This episode is really beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Like the autumn trees and whatnot. They got like this kind of Ewok style tree hideout. Aang's loving it. Like Aang's is loving it. Jett's being a smooth talker. Katara kind of gets a bit of a crush. Like they literally do like the sparkles in her eye. She blushes.
The anime sparkles. I also got major Bad Batch like vibes from this group. And so for those of you that don't know, Star Wars did a show about so Nick, have you seen Clone Wars?
I've seen bits and pieces.
Have you seen the episode with Clone Trooper 99?
I have not.
Okay, so basically, the way the clones are made is they're grown in tanks and then they mature, right? But the thing is that some of them don't like mature right. Some of them have like deformities, and that was 99, and he died in one of the episodes. But then you had this batch of clones that had like enhancement, that had like deformities, if you will, but deformities that were useful in a combat situation. Like their team leader's a good tracker. Their big bruiser was like deformedly huge, but he has super strength. So they're basically super soldiers, and they're kind of specializing in more unconventional warfare.
So I guess you could say they're kind of like Justice League Spec Ops team.
They're kind of like the Young Justice team, yeah, kind of. Except they're not young.
Well, technically they are.
Technically, yeah.
Technically they're younger than Young Justice, but we're kind of getting in the weeds here. So kind of reeling it back in. So, Sokka is being suspicious. Katara, she's head over heels for him. She's puppy love, so to speak. But like he's too enamored with Jett to really think he can do any wrong. Aang's just like, I'm having fun. He's like, eh.
That's Aang.
So you think, they take out Fire Nation shipments, they take their supply lines, they're an insurgency, kind of thing. But you think, they just take out military targets, kind of thing. but then they're going to they literally try to rob an old man who is Fire Nation, but he's kind of an old man, which it also it raises the important question: is a non-enemy combatant an enemy? I mean, I just kind of just because they're a different nation, just because they're a different thing. I mean, sure. That's why we have rules of war. That's why there's these called war crimes.
That's what I was gonna say. Is that the difference between a terrorist and a war criminal is a terrorist does not, or like a in a war, the difference between a terrorist and like a combat and essentially a combatant is that a terrorist does not discriminate intentionally does not discriminate between combatant and non-combatant. Jett's clearly a terrorist because he does not care if you're old, if you're a woman, if you're a child. It doesn't matter. As long as you have that Fire Nation thing, you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. So and yet also he's like he raises the concerns and he says, "Oh, this guy was gonna poison me and whatnot." And he's like, he had no dagger, like it's like his word against his, and shot him down and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of there's this dam with this reservoir that like Katara and Aang kind of help fill, and the plan is to blast it with blasting jelly and destroy the village. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that's a terrorist act. That is
and that itself is actually considered a war crime. You can't like destroy the people's ability to live. And I mean, granted, in a war, if you're in an urban environment, some buildings are going to be destroyed, but you can't just outright do an act that's going to wipe out an entire.
If that was a Fire Nation base, then all bets are off.
If that was a base, yeah, but the fact that it's a village, even if they're using it as cover, that's still considered a war crime.
Yeah, which that kind of goes beyond the scope of this episode, but it does that's the whole discussion we're having nowadays about modern terrorists using urban centers as cover or in hospitals, which are very, very big no-no.
I mean, in the Iraq War, we saw there were lots of insurgents that were using mosques as cover because they knew we wouldn't shoot in them.
Yeah, they still use that kind of tactic. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that goes way beyond the scope of this episode.
Yeah,
but I figured it was kind of important to touch on it.
It is important.
But yeah, so it actually happens. They stop Jett, which I love that they gave him like dual sword breakers. So yeah. Like, I don't know how you're familiar with that type of weapon, right?
No.
So it's it pretty much functions exactly as you see on the show, where it's like it's more of a defensive weapon kind of thing. Like how sais are meant to like block katanas. Like sais are more of a defensive weapon. Same thing with sword breakers. They're kind of meant to trap the swords and kind of bat it away. I really like that Jett uses dual sword breakers. It really kind of makes his fighting style a lot more interesting, a little bit different, and it gives him a little bit more movement options. I think that's really cool. I love the final fight between him and Aang. That is like straight out of like an Asian martial arts movie right there, I gotta say.
Yeah. And I love how apparently you would think by this point they would trust Sokka, because in the past, every time they have doubted him, it hasn't worked out.
But you got to remember, Sokka and Katara, they're brother and sister. So it's like, and Aang, he's just kind of along for the ride, But yeah, so they blow up the dam and it destroys the village. But lo and behold, Sokka actually warned them. And this is, I love this episode is really good with like setup payoff, because there's two of them. One, they show the traps. They show that. And the traps that eventually allow Sokka to escape. And then also, because Sokka was like raising concerns about like being an old man in front of the old man, when he went to warn the village, the old man vouched for him.
Yeah.
So if Sokka hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been able to get them out. So it's like, if this is a no good deed goes unpunished kind of scenario, and I really like it.
Yeah.
And so, they leave, and you kind of get the thesis of like, trust your instincts. Sometimes you gotta trust your instincts. Sokka, we're going the wrong way, and sometimes you don't. And it's like, I love I love it has such a beautiful end cap on this episode. Like it just clearly states the moral of the story. It's just so well, and I love it. So, any other thoughts you want to add? Any?
Again, I would say from what I'm seeing, the way I'm actually interpreting the show is it's a war show. It's a show about war because we're seeing all these different themes about like rules of engagement, differentiating combatant from non-combatant. This is very much a war show.
I would agree with that interpretation. I mean, I feel like it's a little bit more than that, but like calling it a war show is not a bad read, in my opinion.
It's just the way I'm interpreting it because I'm seeing,
and I feel like it's a valid way to look at the show. I'm not
because
I'm not
one of the
to,
things, in addition to comic books, the other passion I have is reading about war and military history and stuff. That's why I know so much about the Iraq War and stuff. But it's like I see like a lot of the same themes from those books, TV shows, and movies in this show, which is astounding because this show, a show for kids, is dealing with these heavy topics. I know this is why it's so good. It's dealing with topics of like pretty much genocide and being an insurgency against a hostile force, but it's dealing it in a way that kids can watch it.
Yeah, and it makes it very palatable, and it's not talking down to them, and plus it's still like entertaining for adults to watch. It's handled with a very deft hand, shall I say?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Like I think Avatar handles these kind of politics better than some adult shows, honestly.
Oh, dude, particularly nowadays, the adult shows would be hitting you over the head with stuff.
Yeah, like honestly, I don't think modern writers could handle the nuance that this show has, because like notice how there's kind of like a clash of male egos going on between like Jet and Sokka and whatnot. Like they I guarantee you, if this was written now, the word toxic masculinity would have been thrown around a couple of times, probably by Katara.
Oh yeah. Stop being toxic, you guys. You're such men. And I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, because the modern crop of writers don't know the meaning of the word nuance. They do not at all.
Like, to be fair, they do touch on gender roles. I think even in this episode, Katara does say, like, why do men always have to be leaders and whatnot? But I feel like it comes from a place of, like, questioning the status quo rather than mocking it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like this show. It doesn't preach to you. That's a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are your final thoughts on this episode?
Pretty good. I'm enjoying it so far. And once again, I say this every week, but why wasn't I watching the show in the very beginning? Well, that's gonna be a running thing throughout the entire series.
Oh yeah, for sure. So next week we'll be tackling the Great Divide, otherwise known as probably one of the worst episodes, or at least that's what the fandom thinks. I guess we'll have our thoughts then. So this has been Nick from the Phoenix Press, and remember, I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.